There is a reason this message found you today, and it is not random, because there are moments in life when heaven suddenly feels quiet, when your prayers seem to rise but never return with answers, when you keep believing but nothing around you changes, and somewhere deep inside your heart a question begins to grow that you never expected to ask. What if God stopped listening? What if the silence means something is wrong? What if the waiting means you were forgotten? But what if the silence you are experiencing right now is not rejection at all? What if it is preparation? What if the quiet season surrounding your life is not evidence that heaven moved away from you, but proof that heaven is moving things into place for you in ways your eyes cannot yet see? Because throughout history, whenever God prepared someone for something greater than they imagined, he almost always began with silence. Before Joseph stood in authority, he stood in isolation. Before David wore a crown, he walked through wilderness. Before Moses parted the sea, he spent years in obscurity. Before Esther stepped into purpose, she lived unnoticed. Before Jesus stepped into public ministry, heaven allowed decades of hidden years around his life. And if silence surrounded the lives of people chosen for extraordinary assignments, then maybe the silence around your life right now is not a sign that your story is slowing down, but a signal that your story is being positioned for something bigger than your present understanding. Because God does not waste silence, he uses it to shape endurance, he uses it to strengthen faith, he uses it to remove distractions, he uses it to align timing, he uses it to prepare hearts for responsibilities that cannot be carried without spiritual maturity. And maybe that is why this season feels different than anything you have walked through before. Maybe that is why answers feel delayed. Maybe that is why doors stayed closed longer than expected. Maybe that is why progress seems invisible even though effort never stopped, because preparation rarely feels exciting while it is happening. Seeds grow underground, muscles strengthen through resistance, diamonds form under pressure, and destinies are shaped in silence long before they appear in public view. And maybe right now, while you are wondering why nothing seems to move, heaven is arranging conversations you have not heard yet, opportunities you have not seen yet, doors you have not reached yet, and protection you never even knew you needed. Because one of the greatest truths most people never realize is that God often hides his greatest work inside seasons that feel the most uncertain, and sometimes the silence you are questioning today becomes the testimony you will thank him for tomorrow. Because silence does not mean absence, silence often means construction. Silence does not mean abandonment, silence often means alignment. Silence does not mean delay, silence often means timing. And maybe the reason you are still watching this right now is because something inside your spirit already recognizes that your season is not empty, your waiting is not wasted, your prayers are not ignored, and your story is not finished. Because God never sends purpose without preparation, and he never releases calling without first building character strong enough to carry it. And sometimes that character is shaped in seasons where nothing around you changes, but everything inside you begins to transform, where confidence becomes deeper, where patience becomes stronger, where faith becomes quieter but more powerful, where identity becomes clearer, and where dependence on God becomes stronger than dependence on circumstances. And maybe what you are experiencing right now is not the absence of progress, but the presence of preparation happening beneath the surface where human eyes cannot measure it. And maybe the silence around your life is actually protecting you from stepping into opportunities too early, protecting you from relationships that would not survive your Future assignment protecting you from doors that looked right but were never meant for you, because God does not only prepare blessings, He prepares people to carry those blessings. And there are moments when heaven delays answers, not because prayers were ignored but because timing had not finished aligning yet. And maybe right now, while you are standing inside what feels like waiting, heaven is standing inside what looks like preparation, because the truth is, silence has always been the training ground for people who were about to step into purpose. And maybe the reason your process feels longer is because your impact will reach farther than you expected. Maybe the reason your season feels heavier is because your assignment carries more weight than you realized. Maybe the reason your answers feel delayed is because your future requires strength that comfort could never produce. And if God trusted Joseph with silence before leadership, and trusted David with silence before kingship, and trusted Moses with silence before deliverance, then maybe He is trusting you with silence before something greater than you imagined. Because silence has never been the place where destiny disappears. Silence has always been the place where destiny develops. And maybe right now, in the middle of what feels like nothing, heaven is already moving pieces into position, already arranging people into purpose, already shifting doors into alignment, already preparing moments into timing. And one day you will look back at this quiet season and realize that nothing about it was empty, nothing about it was accidental, nothing about it was wasted, because the silence you survived became the strength you needed, the patience you practiced became the endurance your future required, and the faith you protected became the key that opened doors you could never open alone. And maybe right now, even though nothing around you looks different, something inside you is already changing. Something inside you is becoming stronger, something inside you is becoming clearer, something inside you is becoming ready for the moment heaven has been preparing longer than you realize. Because silence has never been the end of a story with God. Silence has always been the beginning of something powerful that only faith can recognize before it arrives. And what you must understand in this season, the season where nothing seems to move, nothing seems to change, and nothing seems to answer, is that silence is not abandonment, silence is alignment. Because the same God who spoke galaxies into existence with a word does not suddenly lose His voice when your life becomes difficult. He becomes quiet when He is working behind doors you cannot yet open, arranging connections you have not yet met, protecting you from outcomes you cannot yet see, and strengthening parts of your spirit that cannot survive the level He is preparing to take you to unless they are first refined in waiting fire. Because many people think blessing means speed, but God often chooses depth before destiny, and depth always feels like delay while you are inside it. Yet what looks like stillness to you is structure to Him. What feels like emptiness to you is preparation to Him. And what feels like rejection to you is often divine redirection, moving you away from something that would have looked good but destroyed your calling later. There are moments when you pray and heaven feels silent, not because God is ignoring you but because He is building something so precise that if He answered too early it would collapse under the weight of your future responsibility. And the truth is, God does not prepare ordinary people for extraordinary assignments in comfortable seasons. He prepares them in hidden seasons where nobody claps for them, nobody supports them, nobody understands them, and sometimes nobody even believes in them except Him. Because the strongest faith is not built when prayers are answered instantly, but when faith continues standing even after months of silence, confusion, and unanswered questions. And that is the kind of faith that moves mountains later in life. You may not realize it yet, but the season you are walking through right now is not punishment, it is positioning. Because God never wastes silence, He uses silence like a sculptor uses pressure, shaping your patience, shaping your endurance, shaping your courage until you become the person who can carry the blessing you have been praying for without losing yourself inside it. And sometimes the greatest protection God gives you is not giving you what you asked for when you asked for it, because He could see what you could not see, and He loved you enough to delay what you thought you needed so He could give you something greater than what you imagined. Think about the times in your life when things did not work out the way you planned, and how later you realized that what felt like a closed door was actually a shield protecting you from a mistake that would have changed your entire path. And understand this clearly: God's silence is never random, it is always intentional, it is always purposeful. And it is always connected to something bigger than your present moment, even if you cannot understand it right now, because faith is not believing when everything makes sense. Faith is believing when nothing makes sense and still choosing to trust that God is working where your eyes cannot see. Some of the strongest people you admire today were shaped in silent seasons nobody ever noticed. Nights when they cried alone, mornings when they woke up discouraged but kept going anyway, months when they questioned everything yet refused to quit because something deep inside them believed God had not brought them this far just to leave them unfinished. And that same quiet strength is being built inside you right now, even if you cannot feel it yet, even if you cannot see it yet, and even if nobody around you recognizes it yet, because God often does His greatest work in invisible places before revealing visible miracles. And maybe the reason this season feels so heavy is because something powerful is being prepared for your future, something bigger than your current comfort zone, something stronger than your current expectations, something that will require a version of you that does not exist yet. Which is why God is shaping you in silence instead of rushing you into something before you are ready for it. Because blessings given too early become burdens, but blessings given at the right time become breakthroughs. So if you are in a season right now where answers feel delayed, doors feel closed, and prayers feel quiet, do not mistake silence for absence, because God has not stepped away from your life. He has stepped deeper into your story, working in places you cannot yet reach and arranging outcomes you cannot yet imagine. And one day you will look back at this exact moment, the moment that feels confusing today, and realize it was the turning point where everything began changing, even though nothing looked different on the outside at the time. Sparkles, because sometimes the biggest miracles begin in the quietest seasons, and the greatest blessings are prepared while heaven seems silent. There is a moment in every chosen person's life when the silence of God begins to feel heavier than the problem itself, when you start wondering if heaven has forgotten your address, if your prayers stopped halfway between earth and eternity, if maybe the promises you believed so strongly were never meant for someone like you. But what if this silence is not abandonment at all? What if this is the exact moment heaven is rearranging your future in ways you cannot yet see, because God never wastes silence and He never delays without purpose. And the truth most people don't realize is that the deeper the silence becomes, the closer you are standing to something that will permanently change your story, because before every divine shift there is always a season where nothing makes sense and everything feels uncertain and uncomfortable. Yet this is exactly where faith stops being words and starts becoming transformation. Because faith that survives silence becomes unbreakable faith, and God is not preparing you for something small or temporary, but for something that will require strength you didn't know you had, patience you didn't think you could develop, and trust that goes beyond what your eyes can see, because if God explained everything too early you would rely on explanation instead of trusting Him, and if He moved too quickly you would celebrate the blessing without becoming the person strong enough to carry it. So sometimes heaven becomes quiet not because God is absent but because He is working behind the scenes where your eyes cannot follow, shaping doors you cannot open yet and protecting paths you are not ready to walk yet. And right now you may feel like nothing is happening, but what you cannot see is that your character is being strengthened, your spirit is being sharpened, your patience is being stretched, and your future is being positioned step by step in ways that will only make sense later. Because God always prepares the person before He releases the promise, and the reason this silence feels longer than expected is because what God is preparing for you is bigger than what you asked for, stronger than what you imagined, and more permanent than what you planned, and the enemy wants you to believe that silence means rejection, but heaven wants you to understand that silence means construction. Because while you are waiting, God is aligning people you haven't met yet, opportunities you cannot see yet, protection you didn't even know you needed yet, and blessings that cannot arrive until the timing becomes perfect. And sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that divine timing rarely matches human expectations, yet it always produces better results than human planning ever could. Because what feels like delay to you is actually precision to God, and what feels like emptiness to you is actually preparation in motion. And there are moments when heaven becomes quiet simply because God is teaching you to walk by faith instead of feelings. Because feelings change every day, but His promises never change. And when you keep believing even without evidence, something powerful begins to grow inside you that nothing in this world can shake. Because silent seasons create strong believers, and strong believers carry extraordinary assignments. And maybe this silence you are walking through right now is not a pause in your story but a turning point in your destiny. Maybe God is removing distractions before releasing direction. Maybe He is closing doors that would have delayed your purpose. Maybe He is protecting you from outcomes that looked good but would have damaged your future, because sometimes the greatest protection arrives disguised as silence, and sometimes the greatest breakthroughs begin in the quietest seasons of life. And what makes this moment so important is that your response to silence determines what happens next. Because the people who keep trusting during silence become the people who witness miracles after silence. And if God trusted you enough to bring you this far, He is not going to abandon you now, because He does not start stories He does not plan to finish, and He does not plant purpose inside someone He does not intend to grow into something powerful. And right now, even if you cannot hear His voice clearly, He is still guiding your steps quietly, still strengthening your heart silently, still positioning your future carefully. Because silence in God's kingdom is never empty, it is always active, always intentional, always meaningful. And one day very soon you will look back at this exact season and realize the silence you feared the most was actually the moment God was preparing the greatest shift of your life, the moment He was building strength inside you that success could not destroy, the moment He was shaping patience inside you that pressure could not break, the moment He was preparing blessings so perfectly timed that when they finally arrived you would understand why nothing else worked before. And when that day comes you will not regret the silence, because you will finally see that every unanswered prayer, every delayed opportunity, every confusing moment was part of a larger plan that never stopped moving even when you thought everything had stopped. And that realization will change the way you trust God forever. Folded hands sparkles, because you will understand that silence was never the end of your story. it was the beginning of something heaven was preparing just for you. Listen carefully, because this is the moment most people misunderstand their destiny. This is the season when heaven becomes quiet, not because God has stepped away from you, but because He is working behind doors you cannot yet see, and what feels like delay is actually divine alignment happening at a level deeper than your emotions can measure. Because when God is preparing something big in your life, He does not always announce it with noise. Sometimes He hides it inside waiting, inside confusion, inside nights where you wonder why nothing is changing even though you have been praying harder than ever before. And the truth is, the silence you are experiencing right now is not rejection, it is protection, because if God answered some of your prayers immediately, you would step into rooms before you were ready and meet people before your spirit was strong enough to handle them, and carry blessings before your heart learned how to protect them. And this is why heaven sometimes slows your timeline while strengthening your foundation, because God is not interested in giving you something temporary. He is building something permanent inside your life, something that will not collapse when pressure comes, something that will not disappear when circumstances shift, something that will not break when others walk away from you. And right now, even though it feels like nothing is happening, there are invisible battles being fought on your behalf. There are opportunities being rearranged, there are connections being positioned, there are doors quietly unlocking in places you have never even imagined yet. And while you are waiting, God is teaching you patience, because patience is not weakness, it is preparation. Patience is what transforms ordinary faith into unshakable faith. Patience is what separates those who quit early from those who receive miracles later. And maybe you have been asking yourself why your life does not look like other people's lives right now. Why their prayers seem faster, why their progress seems smoother, why their path seems clearer. But what you must understand is that comparison blinds you from recognizing your own divine assignment, because your story is not designed to look like anyone else's story. Your journey is not supposed to move at someone else's speed. Your breakthrough is not supposed to arrive on someone else's calendar. And the silence you are walking through today is shaping a version of you that will be strong enough to carry tomorrow's blessing without losing yourself inside it. Because God never prepares the blessing first, He prepares the person first, and that preparation often happens in quiet seasons where nobody is clapping for you, nobody is noticing you, nobody is celebrating you, but heaven is still watching you grow stronger every single day. And maybe you have cried in private, maybe you have prayed without answers, maybe you have kept believing even when your circumstances gave you every reason to stop believing. But those hidden moments are not wasted moments, they are sacred moments, because God does His deepest work in places where nobody else can see it. And what you are becoming right now is more powerful than what you are waiting for right now, because when the blessing finally arrives, it will not just change your situation, it will reveal why the silence had to happen first. It will reveal why the delay protected you. It will reveal why certain people disappeared from your life. It will reveal why certain doors stayed closed longer than you expected. And one day you will look back at this quiet season and realize that it was never empty, it was never pointless, it was never forgotten by heaven. It was the season where God was strengthening your spirit, building your courage, sharpening your faith, and positioning your future in ways you could not see yet, but were always happening for your good. So if today feels slower than you expected, do not lose hope, because silence is often the language God uses when He is preparing something too big to explain, too early and too powerful to release before the right moment arrives. And your moment is closer than you think, even if you cannot see it yet. There comes a moment in every chosen person's journey when the silence of God begins to feel heavier than the struggles themselves, when the waiting stretches longer than expected and the answers seem farther away than before, and in that fragile space your heart starts whispering questions you are almost afraid to say out loud, asking why the door has not opened yet, asking why the promise has not appeared yet. Asking why heaven still feels quiet even after all the prayers you have prayed, but what many people do not realize is that this exact moment is where God begins shaping something inside you that cannot be formed any other way, because silence is not the absence of God's movement. Silence is the environment where God prepares the kind of strength that cannot be shaken later when your calling finally arrives. And right now, even though you may not see it clearly, even though you may not understand the delay, even though it feels like your life has been paused while everyone else keeps moving forward, heaven is not ignoring you. Heaven is investing in you in ways that your present situation cannot yet explain. Because there are blessings that arrive quickly and disappear quickly, but there are also blessings that arrive slowly and change everything forever. And the reason your story feels slower is because your purpose is heavier than what most people carry, your calling is deeper than what most people see, and your future is larger than what your current season is able to contain. Which is why God is preparing space inside your heart before He releases what He already planned for your life long before you even knew how to pray about it. And sometimes the silence you are experiencing right now is not a sign that something is wrong, but a signal that something sacred is being arranged behind the scenes where your eyes cannot reach yet. Because God never wastes a waiting season, and He never allows silence without intention. Every quiet moment has direction, even when it feels confusing. Every delay has purpose, even when it feels painful, and every unanswered prayer is still being held in hands that have never once forgotten your name. And if you look back carefully at the seasons you already survived, you will begin to notice something powerful that most people miss. That the moments when God felt the quietest were often the same moments when He was positioning something that later changed your entire life, because preparation rarely feels exciting while it is happening, but it always becomes clear once the breakthrough finally arrives. And what makes your situation different right now is that you are standing closer to the turning point than you realize, closer to the answer than your emotions are telling you, closer to the moment when everything begins making sense than your doubts are allowing you to believe. And the silence you are walking through today is not the end of your story, but the doorway into a chapter that requires a stronger version of you than the one who started this journey, which is exactly why God has been working quietly instead of quickly, carefully instead of loudly, deeply instead of visibly, because He is not just changing your circumstances, He is shaping your identity so that when the promise finally arrives you will not lose it, you will not misuse it, and you will not walk away from it out of fear or confusion like you might have before this season began. And there are things about your future that require courage you did not have last year, faith you did not have last month, and patience you did not have when this journey first started, which is why the silence has been longer than you expected, but also more powerful than you can currently measure, because the same God who allowed this quiet season also designed the exact moment when it will end. And nothing you are experiencing right now has surprised Him or delayed Him or confused Him in any way. He already saw the obstacles before they appeared, He already planned solutions before the problems arrived, and He already prepared the doors before you even started looking for them. And what feels like uncertainty to you is actually precision to Him. what feels like delay to you is actually protection from something you could not see yet, and what feels like silence to you is actually strategy unfolding at a level beyond your understanding. Because there are conversations happening in heaven about your life that your ears cannot hear yet, and there are alignments taking place around your destiny that your eyes cannot recognize yet, but they are happening even now while you are still waiting, still praying, still hoping, still wondering when something will finally change, and the truth is something already is changing even if it is not visible yet, because the strongest transformations begin inside before they appear outside. And the confidence you are slowly building during this silent season is going to become the foundation that carries you through the breakthrough that is closer than you think, and one day very soon you will look back at this quiet chapter not with confusion but with gratitude, because you will finally understand that God was never distant from you during this time. He was walking beside you in ways you simply could not recognize yet, strengthening you in ways you could not measure yet, and preparing something for you that required silence before it could be revealed in power. Listen carefully, because this is the moment most people misunderstand the silence of God and accidentally walk away from the very miracle that was already forming behind the curtain of heaven, because what feels like abandonment is often protection, what feels like delay is often alignment, and what feels like emptiness is often God clearing space in your life for something your current mindset could not yet carry. And right now, even if you cannot see it, there are conversations happening about you in the spiritual realm that your physical eyes are not allowed to witness yet, because if God showed you everything too early, your fear would interfere with your faith and your doubt would sabotage your destiny, and that is why He sometimes chooses silence instead of explanation, distance instead of demonstration, waiting instead of immediate answers, because He is not trying to confuse you, He is trying to transform you. And transformation always happens in hidden places before it appears. Invisible results, just like a seed buried under dark soil looks forgotten until the day it suddenly breaks through the surface seedling, and everyone calls it a miracle even though God was working on it the entire time. And the truth is, your story right now may look unfinished, delayed, or even painful, but heaven never writes unfinished endings. Heaven writes powerful turnarounds. And what you are walking through is not evidence that God left you, it is evidence that God trusts you enough to grow you beyond the version of yourself that once depended only on what you could see instead of who He is, because real faith begins where visible reassurance ends, and some of the strongest people God ever used went through long seasons where they heard nothing yet were being prepared for everything. And the silence you are facing today may actually be the doorway to the strongest version of your future self that has ever existed. Because when God removes noise, He is making room for clarity. When He removes people, He is making room for purpose. When He removes comfort, He is making room for calling. And sometimes the reason prayers feel unanswered is not because God is ignoring you, but because He is answering a deeper prayer you did not even know how to speak yet, the prayer that asks for strength instead of shortcuts, wisdom instead of temporary solutions, destiny instead of distraction, and that kind of answer requires time, patience, and trust, which is why this season you are walking through right now is not punishment but positioning, not rejection but redirection, not silence but strategy, because heaven never wastes waiting seasons and God never wastes faithful hearts that continue believing even when nothing around them looks like progress. And maybe today you feel like your effort is invisible, your prayers are unheard, your tears are unnoticed, and your hope is slowly getting tired. But what if I told you that some of the most powerful moments of divine movement happen exactly when everything feels still on the surface, because silence is where foundations are strengthened and roots are deepened and identities are rebuilt, so that when your blessing finally arrives it does not destroy you but establishes you, and that is why quitting right now would be the greatest mistake you could make, because the silence is not the end of your story, it is the middle of your preparation. And God is not late in your life even if everything feels delayed, He is working on a timeline that protects your future instead of rushing your comfort, and there are doors He is keeping closed not to disappoint you but to defend you from paths that would have stolen your peace later, and there are answers He is delaying not to test your patience but to increase your capacity to carry what you asked for. Because blessings without preparation become burdens but blessings with preparation become legacy. And your life was never meant to be ordinary or accidental or unnoticed in Heaven's plan, which means this silence has purpose even if it does not yet have explanation, and the moment you decide to trust God in silence instead of only trusting Him in clarity is the moment your faith becomes powerful enough to unlock the next chapter that has been waiting for you all along. Sparkles, and somewhere beyond what you can currently see there is a breakthrough already moving toward you. There is restoration already being arranged for you. There is a door already being prepared for you. And there is a version of your life already written that will make sense of everything you are confused about today if you simply refuse to walk away during the quiet season that was never meant to destroy you but was always meant to prepare you.